After being colonized, ruled, and influenced by the Spanish regime for around 3.5 centuries, the Philippine Islands was led by General Emilio Aguinaldo and his men proclaimed its independence and freedom from the Spanish government on the 12th of June 1898. Now, Don Ambrosio Villazares Bautista, a well-known lawyer and the personal advisor of General Aguinaldo, authored the Act of Proclamation of Independence of the Filipino people on the Day of Independence. Good day, sir, and my fellow classmates. Today, our group will present to you our contextual and content analysis of the author.
Thank you, Mr. Ayan. During the Spanish-American War, Filipino rebels, led by Emilio Aguinaldo, proclaimed the independence of the Philippines after the 300 years of Spanish rule. The Act of Proclamation of Independence was written and proclaimed by Don Ambrosio Bautista on the day of independence in June 12, 1898. And it also proclaimed the independence of the General Emilio's residence at Kawit, Cavite at approximately 4 to 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Together with them, the U.S. Army who witnessed the proclamation, and was the time that Paul V. McNutt said that a new nation was born. Coming up next to me, Mr. Dolor, Christian.
Don Ambrosio or Ambrosio Rianzares Bautista is born on 7th of December 1830 in Binyan, Laguna, who is a lawyer and finished his degree in University of Santo Tomas, and the author of the Act of Proclamation of Independence of the Filipino people, which he wrote in the Day of Independence on June 12, 1898. After the Day of Declaration of Independence of the Philippines, Don Ambrosio was appointed as Auditor General de Guerra, or as the political advisor of Emilio Aguinaldo, the first president of the Philippines. A year later, on the 14th of July 1899, he was elected as the Revolutionary Congress. Afterwards, Don Ambrosio succeeded Pedro A. Paterno and
So Don Ambrosio wrote and proclaimed the documents to recognize the hardship and endeavors to every Filipino man and to put the freedom of it, because we are colonized by the Spaniard. And then this document gives an inspiration and motivation to every Filipino to eagerly fight for our freedom through the Spaniards. And the author is, and our first president, who is Emilio Aguinaldo, gave and appointed Don Ambrosio to write this document.
Don Ambrosio is a known lawyer in his time and was publicly known as the defender of the poor and of the laborers. He is also the first political advisor of the first seated president of the Philippines, General Emilio Aguinaldo, who also appointed him as his own auditor General de Guerra. In Don Ambrosio's time of service, he have penned and written several important documents that significantly helped shift the course of Philippine history.
And now for relevance and meaning of the source. Don Ambrosio's written document, the Act of Proclamation of Independence of the Filipino people, act as a great reminder to present and coming Filipino generation and all tribulations, endeavors, and hardship of all Filipinos, both men and women, to go through to cope freedom for our country. It is documentation of our freedom from Spanish colonization. It is proof of the victory and achievement that as country as Filipino, we and our ancestors have achieved and succeeded. So, documentation of Don Ambrosius is a relevant piece. It will not be used today but also for the future. And it is like a guide or an act that this documentation will be passed generation by generation to help them and remind them that our ancestors, we Filipino people, in the past have struggled to cope freedom and justice for freedom of Philippines from colonization of the United States and Spain. And right up next, Jannele Tubaing.
Now we will discuss about the main idea of the document that was written by Don Ambrosio Bautista, which is the Declaration of the Philippine Independence. Okay, but before that, we'll talk about what will happen to the Filipinos if they were still in the hands of Spaniards. Okay, so Filipinos are slaves of the Spaniards, and if not prevented or stopped, Filipinos will suffer even more and will also have threatening life in the future, right? Diba? So most of our ancestors experience how cruel is the Spaniards. Okay, so the Spaniards tends to abuse and more likely to kill those who do not follow their rules and regulations at that time. But then, because of the documents that was written by Mr. Ambrosio Bautista together with Emilio Aguinaldo and 98 others who signed the documents about the Declaration of the Philippine Independence, the Filipinos or the whole Philippines were saved. Okay, so what is the purpose of the document that was written by them about the Declaration of the Philippine Independence? Okay, so the Declaration of the Philippine Independence has a purpose to proclaim the sovereignty and independence of the Philippines from the colonial rule of the Spanish Empire. Okay, so their goal that is why they write this document is to be free from the Spaniard, right? So their main purpose is to get the full authority of the Philippines or our country from the rulers, which is the Spaniards. Let's read the second bullet. The Act of Declaration of Philippine Independence declared that the Filipinos are and have the right to be free and independent, and that the nation from this day commenced to have a life of its own, with every political tie between Filipinos and Spain severed and annulled. Okay, so the ties between Philippines and the Philippines and the Spain were cut na. And now they already have freedom. Okay, so again, the main idea of the document about the Declaration of the Philippine Independence is that we Filipinos have the right to be free and be a ruler of our own country. So yeah, the Declaration of the Philippine Independence is one of the most important milestones in the Philippine history. The country was colonized by many nations for 100 years. Imagine achieving your freedom after all the hardships you've been through. It is really priceless. Okay, so now may I call on Ms. Benzon for the next report, and she will discuss about the specific ideas. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Ms. Tubaing. So I will be sharing to you the specific ideas of the Declaration of Philippine Independence by Ambrosio Gonzalez Bautista. The Declaration of Independence is the document in which Filipino revolutionary forces under Emilio Aguinaldo, later the Philippines Republican President, proclaimed the sovereignty and independence of the Philippine Islands from the colonial rule of the Spain after the latter was defeated at the Battle of Manila Bay during the Spanish-American War. Accordingly, Emilio Aguinaldo thought that it was necessary to declare the independence of the Philippines to inspire Filipino people to fight more eagerly against the Spaniards. The Declaration of Independence would also lead the foreign countries to recognize the independence of the country. The Declaration of Independence is one of the most important milestones of the Philippine history. The country was colonized by hundreds of nations in the past few years. Imagine, Achieving freedom for all the hardships you have gone through is priceless. So, as we move on, Mr. Noble will share also a specific ideas about the Declaration of Philippine Independence by Ambrosio Gonzales Bautista.
Thank you for that, Cherrybie, Miral, Benzon. And now, for the next specific idea. General Aguinaldo thought it was necessary to declare the independence of the Philippines to inspire the people to fight more eagerly against Spaniards. And Bautista was arrested and jailed at the outbreak of the revolution. So, for this documentation, General Aguinaldo produced it to motivate the Filipino to fight more, that it is near the independence or not just near. It is the independence of freedom of the Philippines that Ambrosius documentation is signed by 98 persons. And up next, Jerene, Faith, Deluvio, Jalandoni.
Brendan. It was resolved unanimously that this nation already free and independent as of this day, and to identify the they or reuse flag which up to now is being used. The white triangle signifies the distinct emblem of the famous Society of the Katipunan, which by means of its blood compact inspired the masses to rise in revolution. The three stars signifies the three principal islands of this archipelago, Luzon, Mindanao, and Panay, where the revolutionary movement started. The sun, it represents the gigantic step made by the son of the country along the path of progress and civilization. The eight rays signifies the eight provinces, Manila, Cavite, Bulacan, Pampanga, Nueva Ecija, Bataan, Laguna, and Batangas, which declares themselves in a state of war as soon as the first revolt was initiated. The colors of blue, red, and white, commemorating the flag of the United States of America as a manifestation of our profound gratitude towards this great nation for its disinterested protection which it lent us and continues lending us. That's all. And the next reporter is Clarence Dandoy.
The technique. The applied technique that is evident in Don Ambrosius, the Act of Proclamation of Independence of Filipino People, is that it was both physically written and verbally and orally declared by him. His written documents focuses and directs onto the revolution of Filipino for freedom against the falling reign of the Spaniard. He had this handwritten as a document and declared as a proclamation at the general's residence in Kawit, Cavite. So therefore, the adopted that can be seen in Don Ambrosius' Act of Proclamation of the Independence of the Filipino people is that it was both physically written and was verbally and orally declared by him. Yes, physically written and was verbally and orally declared by him. His written documents concentrate on the direct towards the revolution of the Filipino people for freedom against the waning Spaniard rule. He had this band written as a document and declared it as a proclamation at the general's residence in Kawit, Cavite.
And now, let me first discuss to you our author's main argument. Don Ambrosius' main argument in his document is that the Filipino people should have the right to be free and independent, that they have ceased to have allegiance to the crown of Spain, that all political ties between them should be completely severed. The document was meant to be a declaration of independence of the Philippine Islands to the Spanish rule. The document shows all the pain, tribulations, and endeavors that all Filipino men and women go through a lot for the country's freedom from oppression. Now let's move on to our author's point of view. Bautista, alongside 98 people, signed and declared the Proclamation of Independence of the Philippines. His work was a declaration of freedom of the Filipino people from the government of Spain. It is certified that this act of declaration of independence was signed by Ambrosio Rianzares Bautista and by all those 98 people, including the only stranger who attended those proceedings, a citizen of the USA, Mr. L. M. Johnson, a colonel of artillery. And now, the next topic will be discussed by Ian Gerald Siano, which are the author's bias and author's claim.
Thank you. For the author's bias, now all throughout the document, it is evident that Don Ambrosio's bias was emphasized on the works and ventures of General Emilio Aguinaldo and also his Filipino men, and also to the aid and assistance of America on their battle against Spanish forces. Now in this document, he also put stress on the revolution that was proposed and also led by General Emilio Aguinaldo, that how it significantly helped lead into the country's independence from Spain. As for the author's claim, it was stated in Don Ambrosio's document in the very start, "Before me, Ambrosio Rianzares Bautista, war counselor and special delegate, designated to proclaim and solemnize this Declaration of Independence by the dictatorial government of the Philippines, pursuant to and by virtue of a decree issued by the egregious dictator Don Emilio Aguinaldo." Now, through this very statement, Bautista did not just communicate to the Filipino people, but also to the Spaniards who are in the country about the independence and freedom of proclaimed by the Filipino people. Now, this was the overall, all throughout the document, the claim of the author. Now, for the conclusion, I would like to ask Jeff again to conclude our analysis.
Again, thank you, Mr. Ian. On the 12th of June, 1898, Don Ambrosio, the author of the Act of Proclamation of Independence of the Filipino People, declared in front of the Filipino congregation the country's independence and freedom from Spain. With that very statement, it brought hope and inspiration and burning fire for freedom to the Filipino people in their battle against the Spaniards. And that being said, Spaniards finally left in the same year, 1898, and were replaced by the Americans who helped the Filipino to stand as a nation. That would be all for our discussion. In behalf of my co-members, thank you for your time. We hope that you learned something.